Another day, another story. Since the arrival of European settlers, leadership for America's indigenous peoples has disproportionately involved fighting to exist. Leadership can entail many things. Welcome to Tabo Eminent Channel. For Native Americans, caring for their people has meant not only securing food and shelter, or carrying forward spiritual teachings and cultural traditions, or helping to keep the peace internally and with neighbors. Some American Indian leaders sought to broker treaties. And when that didn't work, they went to war, to protect their ancestral lands, their hunting grounds and their ways of life. Some gave their lives in the struggle. In later years, leaders have served not only as chiefs but as activists and organizers, calling attention to the ongoing discrimination and oppression of indigenous peoples. Issues have ranged from broken treaties and tribal sovereignty to voting rights and forced sterilization. Though nowhere near complete, this list details many influential Native American leaders, both men and women, who made their mark in history. Powhatan, circa 1547, circa 1618. Powhatan Confederacy. First leader in contact with the Jamestown settlers. Best known as Pocahontas' father, Chief Powhatan, aka Wahusenako, was the supreme indigenous leader in the Chesapeake Bay region of Virginia, who built a confederacy of dozens of tribes, through force, marriage and by adoption. In the early 1600s, Chief Powhatan adopted Englishman John Smith as a warrants, or leader, of what would eventually become Jamestown Colony. But when relations with the English settlers soured, he ordered his warriors to attack James' fort in 1609, initiating the First Anglo-Powhatan War. That lasted until the marriage of his daughter Pocahontas to English colonist John Rolfe. After she died in 1617, Powhatan ceded his rule to his brothers, Opachankino and Itoyata. Opachankino, circa 1554 to 1646. Powhatan Confederacy. One of the canniest resistance leaders in colonial America. Abducted by the Spanish as a youth in 1561 and brought to live in King Philip II's court in Madrid, Opachankino returned 9 years later to become a powerful resistance leader against colonial forces. After the Spanish converted him to Catholicism and baptized him under a new name, Don Luis De Velasco, they returned him to Virginia to convert his people. Decades later, he helped coordinate an attack on the Jamestown colony that nearly drove out the English as well, killing approximately 350 settlers, burning houses and slaughtering livestock. Pope circa 1630–1692. Teva Pueblo. Coordinated successful Pueblo Revolt to drive out Spanish oppressors. Born in what would become present-day New Mexico, Pope translation, Ripe Squash, orchestrated the Pueblo Revolt of 1680, successfully driving out Spanish conquistadors who had enslaved local indigenous people and outlawed their traditions and spiritual practices. After Pope and 46 other leaders were jailed, flogged, and some executed, for sorcery, they planned in secret for 4 years to oust their oppressors. Colonel Louis Cook, aka Atiato Harungwe, circa 1740 to 1814. Mohawk, or Benoki. Highest-ranking Native American officer in the Revolution. Fluent in French, English, and Mohawk, and talented as an opera singer, Cook became renowned as a warrior. His 1779 commission as a lieutenant colonel made him not only the highest-ranking indigenous officer in the Continental Army, but, because his father was of African descent, the only known black officer as well. Tecumseh, 1768–1813. Shawnee. Rallied tribes together against white settlers. A staunch opponent to the encroachment of white settlers and a renowned orator, Tecumseh, birth name, Shooting Star, worked to unite Indian tribes in the Great Lakes region and beyond to collectively defend native lands and cultures. As a leader whose father and brother were killed by American forces, he fought many battles against the US military, defeating General Arthur St. Clair's forces at the Battle of Wabash in 1791. John Ross, 1790–1866. Cherokee tried to stop the Trail of Tears. John Ross, Principal Chief and National Council President of the Cherokee, devoted his life to resisting the US government's seizure of his people's land. Born to a Scottish father and Cherokee mother and educated in a white school, he straddled both worlds, helping draft a constitution and start a tribal newspaper. After rival Cherokee leaders signed a fraudulent treaty giving away ancestral homelands, Ross fought Washington for 2 years against his people's removal, being imprisoned in the process. President Andrew Jackson refused his petitions, leading to the brutal forced migration known as the Trail of Tears. Thousands died, including Ross' wife. He served as chief of the new United Cherokee Nation for the remainder of his life, continuing to fight for his people's needs in Washington actively. Asola, circa 1804–1838. Seminole fought to protect Seminole, Florida homelands. Though not a formal chief, Asola, black drink singer, earned recognition as a prominent military tactician and leader who opposed the Treaty of Payne's Landing, which sought to remove Seminole from their ancestral Florida lands. Eventually, Asola was captured and imprisoned at Fort Moultrie in South Carolina, where he died in 1838. Pam Maka, Running Eagle, died circa 1878. Blackfeet Nation, renowned hunter and warrior. Growing up, young Pam Maka, brown weasel woman, preferred the activities of native males and asked her father to teach her to hunt and fight. On one occasion, she risked her life to rescue him when he fell from his horse during an enemy attack. After he was killed by an enemy war party during a buffalo hunt, she assumed a leadership role, protecting horses from raiders and fighting many battles, including against the Crow. She died in 1878 in a battle with Flathead warriors. Manuelito, circa 1818–1893. Navajo, Dine. Navajo warrior and resistance leader. A leader of the Dine Navajo people, Manuelito led significant resistance to the U.S. government's efforts to relocate them to the arid Bosque Redondo Reservation south of Santa Fe, New Mexico. After Army troops destroyed tribal homes, crops and livestock, some 2/3 of the Navajo surrendered, undergoing the Long Walk of 1864, a brutal forced march to the reservation. Manuelito and thousands of other Dine refused to surrender, withdrawing into the mountains and becoming guerrilla fighters. But after U.S. Army Colonel Kit Carson led the destruction of their food sources, Manuelito surrendered. He eventually traveled to Washington and successfully petitioned for a new Navajo reservation sited on original tribal lands. Red Cloud, 1822–1909. Oglala Lakota, first Indian in the West to win a war against the U.S. A fearless warrior and raider in his youth, Red Cloud became a formidable opponent to the U.S. military in the Upper Plains, especially after the discovery of gold in Montana accelerated the influx of miners and other migrants, threatening the buffalo population and crucial Lakota hunting grounds. Geronimo, 1829–1909. Chiricahua Apache, last Indian leader to formally surrender. A renowned Apache leader and medicine man, Geronimo, birth name, One Who Yawns, was the last Native American leader to formally surrender to the U.S. military. He devoted his life to avenging his murdered family and fearlessly fighting all government efforts to herd his people off their ancestral Southwest lands and onto reservations, whether by treaty or military force. Sitting Bull, circa 1831–1890. Teton, Dakota, defeated Custer at Little Bighorn. One of the most famous Native Americans of the 19th century, Sitting Bull united the Sioux tribes of the Great Plains against white settlers encroaching on their territory. a great warrior chief who joined his first war party at age 14. Sitting Bull fought many battles against the US military in the Great Sioux Wars, culminating with the defeat of General George Armstrong Custer at the infamous Battle of the Little Bighorn. In 1885, Sitting Bull joined Buffalo Bill Cody's Wild West show, gaining national renown. But US officials, fearing he might be leading an uprising, sent Indian police to arrest him. He died while resisting. Queen Liliuokalani, 1838 to 1917. Native Hawaiian. First woman to rule Hawaii. Liliuokalani, the first woman to rule Hawaii, and the archipelago's last monarch, was a gifted musical composer who authored Aloha Oe, a national anthem for Hawaii. After succeeding her brother on the throne in 1891, she fought to restore native Hawaiian sovereignty after white landowners had forced him at gunpoint to cede political power in what came to be known as the Bayonet Constitution. For 5 years, she petitioned President Grover Cleveland and Congress for reinstatement. She was pardoned in 1896. The US officially annexed Hawaii as a territory 2 years later. Luzon, circa 1840 to 1889. Chihenne Apache. Warrior sometimes referred to as the Apache Joan of Arc. Victorio, a Chihenne Apache chief, once said of his warrior sister, "Luzon is my right hand. Strong as a man, braver than most, and cunning in strategy. Luzon is a shield to her people," helping lead the fight against European invaders and forced relocation to horrible conditions in the San Carlos Reservation in Arizona. Luzon rode and fought fiercely alongside her brother for decades. Chief Joseph, 1840 to 1904. Nez Perce led his people on a daring escape. Hailed as a great war leader during the Nez Perce War of 1877, Chief Joseph, thunder rolling down from the mountains, actually made his mark more as a diplomat and peacemaker. After leading forceful dissent against a dubious US government treaty requiring his Nez Perce band to leave their fertile homelands in the Pacific Northwest, he finally consented to migrate rather than be attacked. Forced to surrender 40 miles from the border, he never stopped fighting for his people's return to their ancestral lands. Zit Kalasa Red Bird, 1876 to 1938. Yankton Sioux. Influential activist for women's and Indian rights. Influential writer, musician and activist Zit Kalasa aka Gertrude Simmons Bonin, advocated for both women's suffrage and indigenous rights. Educated at a Quaker-run Indian boarding school, Earlham College and the New England Conservatory of Music, she published essays in Atlantic Monthly and Harper's Weekly and taught briefly at the Carlisle Indian Industrial School, but soon quit to write and agitate. Her works American Indian Stories and Oklahoma's Poor Rich Indians described the horrors of Indian boarding schools and recounted US government corruption in running the reservation system. American Indian Movement, AIM 1968 present. Varied tribal affiliations. 1960s/70s activists who led high-profile protests. In 1968, inspired in part by the civil rights movement, Native American community leaders founded the American Indian Movement, AIM, to bring renewed attention to the history of oppression faced by indigenous people, as well as ongoing issues of broken treaties, discrimination, poverty and inadequate housing, healthcare and job opportunities led by notable activists including Dennis Banks. The FBI and CIA targeted the movement, leading to a violent standoff at the community of Wounded Knee, South Dakota, in 1973. One, Women of all Red Nations, 1974 present. Varied tribal affiliations. Women-run indigenous activist and advocacy organization. Formed in 1974 as a way to supplement the activism of AIM, the American Indian Movement, Women of all Red Nations was the brainchild of women leaders including Lorelei Decorah Means, Madonna Thunderhawk, Phyllis Young and Janet McLeod. The organization is credited for federal regulations on medical sterilization practices in the United States. Wilma Mankiller, 1945 to 2010. Cherokee Nation. First woman chief of a major tribal nation. When Wilma Mankiller took on the role of principal chief of the Cherokee Nation in 1985, she became the first woman ever to head a major Native American tribe. Growing up without power or running water, Mankiller later served as the director of the Oakland Native American Youth Center and even collaborated with members of the Black Panther Party. She served for a decade, making strides in areas like decreased infant mortality, higher education achievement and improved community infrastructure. Thanks for watching. Request you to subscribe the channel.